Hi, everyone. Welcome to Monday Momentum. So I know I talked about it 2 weeks ago. Last week was public holiday, but I talked about it 2 weeks ago that we will be moving Monday Momentum to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, as a lot of our audience has been asking. A lot of the community has been saying, let's try a different time. So we tried a different time on a different platform. So now it's on Zoom, and it is 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So today we're going to be talking about the hidden wealth strategy behind a steady paycheck, right? So we talk about an expansive life. We talk about wanting to make a bigger impact, right? We talk about freedom. Some of our why, our core why is freedom, whether it's financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom, relational freedom, family freedom, whatever that looks like, right? Situational freedom. Um, why do we want that, right? That's the reason why we are working harder. That's the reason why we're thinking outside the box. That's the reason why we want to impact, we want impact beyond our immediate circle. So that's really the reason why my expansive life was created. And that's why we come here every Monday to really talk about or pick one thing that maybe we need to think differently about, maybe a mindset shift, a change about how we move forward. So again, today we're going to be talking about the hidden wealth strategy behind a steady paycheck. And I think this is so important to talk about and to think about. Hello in the comments. And today, right, we're doing something a little different. So instead of kind of coming and hearing me and some of like what I've learned in strategy and sending that out, right, I actually wanted to do I wanted to ask more questions, and I wanted us to think a little bit more about the reason why this is important to you, right? So I want to start with a question, and the chat's open, or unmute yourself, or just kind of answer and tell me what you're thinking. But if your paycheck, right, if you have a steady paycheck, right, my assumption is that a lot of us are 9 to 5, right? That means, and it might not be typical 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., right? But something along those lines. So you go in the morning, or you go in at some time and you leave at some time, right? And for that work that you put in, you're rewarded, or you're given a paycheck. It's not necessarily a reward because you're working for it. But so I want to ask a question, right? If your paycheck disappeared tomorrow, what would change? So I would love, like, I'd love toss it in the comments. I'll give us like a minute or two if my paycheck disappeared tomorrow, right? Or maybe, I don't know, next week, maybe not tomorrow. So it'll give you some time to think. But what would change? Toss it in the chat or unmute yourself. I just want us to think about that. Think about what life would look like, right? Would that bring more stress? How would maybe your lifestyle change? Would it change? Would nothing change, right? Would everything stay the same because you are crushing it, because you've done all the right things? Will everything change? But I would just want us to kind of think through that. So if you have a thought, I would love for you to, again, unmute yourself or toss it in the comments. Tutu said, I would have to adjust my budget. Okay. How? Reprioritize my life, figure out how to still pay the bills, maybe come up with some other form of income. Okay. Okay, I love those answers. Anything else? So then my question is, for those who answer, thank you so much. But then I think my follow-up question or thought would be, what does that tell you about how you're using it right now, right? I always have a side gig. That's a good one. Okay, so technically, right? Family will never have to stress, right? She will be just fine. But for all of us, maybe who don't have a side gig, right? Who you're focused on that 9 to 5, would something change? And I get the sense a lot of people are saying they would have to reprioritize how they're doing life. I would freelance my skills more and learn to build something more stable. Okay, so again, now my follow-up question is like, what does that tell you about how you're using it, right? So right now, how are you using that 9 to 5? How are you using the money that is coming in from there, right? I want you to think about, welcome if you're just joining. We are just talking about the security, right? The hidden wealth strategy behind a steady paycheck. What does that bring for you? And so my first question, if you're just logging in, is what would happen if like that went away? So tomorrow, if you lost your job, what would change? How would your life change? And some of the answers I got was like I would have to reprioritize, I'd budget a little bit more. Some people said they would freelance some of their other skills. And I love that, right? We're thinking about it. But then my follow-up question was, what does that tell you about how you're using it, right? So that means that if you have to reprioritize tomorrow, maybe it's not going towards the right thing today. And so I love the answers that I'm getting. So I want to say, kind of along those lines, right? If you have a sheet of paper, if you have your phone, right? I want you to kind of just do a little tiny bit of inventory, 30 seconds, right? Or ballpark figures. But what, and this is just for you, right? What is your monthly take home income? That's my first question. And secondly, right, what percentage of that is going towards lifestyle? What percentage of that is going towards savings? And what percentage of that is going towards like assets and ownership? I think those three things. So for me, it's probably, and I'll be kind of honest, and I'll not kind of, but I'll tell you, I'm looking at like, for me, it's more like 35% savings, and 20% lifestyle, and probably the rest is going towards asset and ownership. And that's just me because I'm prioritizing things in my life a little bit more different. So, and then so when you're thinking about that, then I want you to kind of just ask yourself, right? Is your paycheck, right? Is that building your present or is that building your future? So if, for instance, and you're honest with yourself, right? If you're someone who like, seriously, you're like YOLO and 80% of your income is going towards your lifestyle, then that for you would mean that you're building towards the present and you're really not building for tomorrow or for the future. So I would love one person if you could just volunteer and be honest with your answers. I'd love one person to just kind of chime in and just tell me what they wrote down, and then kind of go from there. Or you can just put it in the chat and I'll read it and I won't say your name. But if you're a brave soul who wants to unmute themselves and just kind of say what it is for them right now. No judgment. Okay. I got in the chat, I got investment 30%, lifestyle 60%, miscellaneous 10%. Okay. I like that. Thank you for being honest. Do you have one more brave soul? Okay. I like it. Thank you for responding. So I probably 20% ownership, investing, 40% lifestyle, 40% other expenses. Okay. So we're kind of getting mixed answers here, which I love. Now, if if your income increases tomorrow, 60% savings to invest, love that. Oh, people are now coming, love it. 20% investments, 20% lifestyle. Okay. Lifestyle 20%. So we have a lot more people who are less living their best lives here. Okay, I love that. Or in a different way. So if you looked outside, right, outside of our small circle, 70% lifestyle. Okay, I feel like a lot more people are higher on the lifestyle or would be maybe outside of our community here. But what do you think most people would do if their income increases tomorrow? Like if they got if they got a raise of sorts, right? Or like an extra bonus of something, right? What would you think that a lot of people would do? Um, Give me some answers. Shout out in the comments, right? If you got like a nice extra pay tomorrow, what would you do with it, right? Would you shopping? Okay. 20% lifestyle, 20% investment, 50% bills. Bills suck. Got it. Peace. Thank you for chiming in. If you follow that up, if tomorrow, right, someone gave you a significant increase at work, what would you use that to do? Give me some answers. I might do a little bit of shopping. Let's just be honest. Maybe a little bit, but I might. But what would other people investment? Love that. Save more. I would invest in retail therapy. I might too. Increase my investment plan. I'll toss extra into a business. I love that. Okay. So I was kind of asking these questions to kind of some of the people that I work with, and I got a different set of answers than you guys. I got maybe this is working, right? We're having these conversations and it's changing our mindset, and I love it. But when I ask kind of some people I worked with, I'd get a nicer car. I got travel more, and I could probably see myself doing a little bit of that. I would upgrade my house is another answer that I got. And some people just said, like, honestly, I spend a little bit more than I'm spending right now. And those were the answers that I was getting. I was not getting a ton of like invest more. And so I guess for me, right, and if you're listening in, instead of upgrading your lifestyle, call on Famimi and Tutu who said 70% lifestyle. Instead of that, like what would happen if you upgraded your ownership, right? Or if you invested more? And I want you, that's the kind of crux of what we're talking about today. And it's just really thinking about how to use your paycheck to set yourself up for the future, right? What if that paycheck could be seed capital? Someone mentioned in the chat seed capital for maybe an investment or into a business or something, right? What would that look like if in 5 years, right, you're putting 20% into assets? What would that look like if you put that into starting a business or like few seed capital into something? And that's kind of the thing that I wanted to just talk about today as we wrap up. And it's, as entrepreneurs, some of us are entrepreneurs, right? If we had that extra money, a lot of us would say maybe they wanted a stable income, because you sometimes don't get that with entrepreneurship, right? Or stability or security. And so like that paycheck, right? It could be what you do. It's predictable capital that you can use towards building something, or a little bit of a risk cushion, right? So if you take that, if you rewired those numbers, right, and you started thinking, I could use more like 30%, 35% towards ownership, right? When you have stability, and I would say savings are the most important first so that you're covered for a rainy day. But my goal today is just to stop thinking about our job as a cage, right? But really start thinking about it as like maybe a funding source, right? Taking some of that money and putting it towards something else. And I want that to kind of just sink in a little bit. What could that look like? Because when we start thinking about, an expansive life and building more and freedom, right? Some of that comes from our seed money, right? Some of that comes from the capital that we're saving, that we're investing and using that, right? We've talked a lot about what it means to own, and we've talked about the idea of ownership. And so and this is more rhetorical, but what if you knew kind of that your income was going to be stable for the next 3 years, what could you build with that? Like, what could you quietly take away from the side and start building? I would encourage you. I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and the conclusion we came to, and really more, she's a friend, also an accountability partner, but the conclusion we came to is that we think we're doing enough, and we're not even coming close to doing enough, right? And so we think that we're like making all this list and writing all these things, right? But when it comes down to the doing, we're not doing enough. We're not doing the things consistently. Reps, 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 reps. We're not doing it. And so what would it look like if you committed to building quietly, right? To take a portion of it from that stable income and, maybe put it towards an investment, put it towards real estate, put it towards a business, put it towards equity and something, maybe you and your friend want to start something small, whether it's like an online business or whatever it is, right? Or you and a sibling or something. But think about, if you could toss in the comment, right, what is it that you could, and if you want to keep it to yourself, that's okay, but what could you be secretly and quietly building? I don't think secretly, but what could you be quietly building? This is a community, a safe space, and again, right, if you don't want to say it out loud, just say it to yourself, right? But after you do that, what if you committed to it, right? And that's kind of what I just want to leave us with. I always want to challenge you guys to think about what's the one, what can you take away from here today? What is a thinking, a mindset shift, but also practical, right? And so, and this ties into, if you're listening to this, we have a webinar on Saturday about like the investor's mindset, right? And so I would even say what is, and working on that and preparing for that, right? A lot of that are small things that you can do today to get you ready to be that person tomorrow. And so if you made a shift today, right, what could it be? Like something as small as, you know, open some sort of brokerage account, right? And start putting small money every month, right? So just make it automated, a small amount that it hurts a little, but like you can live without it, right? What if you put that into some sort of that, you know, brokerage account? What if you research real estate, right? We talk here, you know, one of the things we talk about in Phoenix is, you know, passive income through real estate investing and purchasing apartments together through syndication. And so what if, you know, you start saving up money to join the next one, right? What does that look like? So that's just something that I want us to think about, right? We talk about an expansive life. And again, I said it's about freedom. And what does that look like? So I would say again, right? Commit to something, commit to it out loud. I'd love for someone to say, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I'm committing to. I still think it's close to the beginning of the year. I don't know where January went and how February is ending next week, but it's still shocking me. But maybe it's not too late to say, I'm going to commit to something this week. And I would say public commitment is power. So if you say it out loud, right, someone's going to keep you accountable. I might ask you next time we come next week, Monday, what, you know, how is it going? What are you committing to? So this is kind of what I just want to leave you with. And if someone again is brave enough to unmute themselves, I'll keep going. But I think it's just something that, again, saying it publicly brings power, and you get accountability, and you get people who are rooting for you, but you're also rooting for yourself. So as we wrap up, right? A steady paycheck is not wealth. We've talked about that, right? Wealth is ownership, but it is leverage. So you use that to build all the things that you want to build, but it brings some level of safety. And there's power in knowing that that is coming in, you know, every month. A lot of people just use it to survive, but then few people really build with it. So it's changing that percentage, you know, between lifestyle, savings, and ownership. I'm really shifting it, right? If you have 70, 80% on lifestyle, maybe you change that a little bit and you think about not just today, but you think about tomorrow. And so that is a choice that I want to leave you with. But I want to say, if anybody has any questions, toss it in the chat, toss it in the comments. But I enjoyed kind of having this conversation and thinking out loud. So welcome to new people who joined in. But if you, the goal again of Monday Momentum is really to just come in, and our goal is to have conversations around mindset and around shifting you know, some of our beliefs, to really understand that we can have freedom, we can have ownership, we can build, we can make an impact, but it starts with some of the decisions that we need to make today. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any additional comments, questions, I loved the interaction in the chat today. I really love that. I got a question. What's the biggest mistake people with steady paychecks make when they're trying to build wealth? I think it's it's two things for me. It's the first one is, I think it's mindset, is thinking that you can't do it, right? It's thinking that the people who do it are already the people who have owned, or they started way ahead of you. And I think that number one mistake is that mindset. We stay stuck in that. So I think changing that and realizing small, tiny drops is really what builds an ocean, right? And so it's tiny, it's what you're doing every single day that's going to get you to where you want to go to. And then another mistake I think people make is that they don't prioritize. A lot of us, right, except us in this group, a lot of us really are thinking about today only. So as their paycheck increases, right, or as it becomes steady, they start thinking about how they can upgrade their life. So a bigger house, a bigger car, more extravagant vacations. Not that you don't deserve it, right? But there's balance, because you're thinking, how can I build for tomorrow, right? If that means living a little less today to take some money from the lifestyle bucket and put it in the investing bucket, your tomorrow will be so much better. It'll be bigger, it'll be greater, but you have to have that mindset. It's that long-term mindset. A lot of us don't have that. Again, we're just thinking for today, but I would hope that you're listening, you're thinking, and you're changing that to think long term, right? The win is in the long term and not necessarily today. So thank you for that question. This was an insightful session. You're very welcome. Okay. Thanks everyone for all the participation. We will be back again next week. I'll say this, invite a friend. So if everybody here invites one more person, the screen will be full. We'll have a ton more interaction, ton more communication, and we're just going to be building something really cool. So thank you so much for coming, and see you next week, Monday.